The Anunnaki didn't come to worship the Creator. They came to become Him. In the Lost Book of Enki, it is written that mankind, Adamu and Ti-Amat, were not born by chance or by divine command. We were engineered, fashioned by the gods of Nibiru through ancient alien DNA manipulation. The primitive worker, a hybrid creation, was built in the Abzu, not in heaven. But why would beings so powerful go through such great lengths to design us? Why was Eve, the first woman, not just born, but awakened with forbidden knowledge? And if Enki gifted us with free will, why did Enlil want us destroyed in a flood of silence? There is a truth so ancient, it was buried under centuries of myth, twisted into sacred texts, and coded into Sumerian tablets. A truth that reveals we may carry within us the very essence of the gods. In this video, you will uncover what the Anunnaki truly intended when they gave us their image. You'll understand why mankind was divided between worship and rebellion, and you'll see how the forbidden history of ancient astronauts, Nephilim, and the creation story changes everything you thought you knew. So stay with me to the end, because what we uncover may not only change your view of the past, but ignite something sacred within you. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like you were more than just human. If you're ready to remember what was forgotten, like this video, subscribe for more revelations, and join the awakening. Adamu Ti-Amat, the forbidden prototype of humanity. In the garden of the gods, in the quiet corners of the Abzu, something sacred and unthinkable was unfolding. The Anunnaki, led by Enki, began to shape the first conscious beings not through prayer or prophecy, but through hands-on science. It was not dust alone that birthed man, but the very life essence of celestial architects, genetic engineering before history even had a name. The primitive worker, Adamu, was not created to praise. He was created to serve. But here's the deeper truth few dare to speak. The story of Adam and Eve is not a tale of sin. It's the record of a suppressed awakening. Enki, the father of knowledge, looked not with fear but with compassion. He saw within the wild Homo erectus not an animal, but potential. These beings roamed naked through the jungle steppe, drinking from rivers, mating freely, living without shame or doctrine. But to the gods they were incomplete. Enki believed that with just a drop of their own DNA, a divine spark, humanity could be born. So he entered the house of life. With Ninhaseg, the mother of healing, they began sacred experimentation. The first attempts were failures, limbs malformed, minds dull, senses absent. One offspring could not walk, another could not speak, one had lungs unsuited for breath. They tried again. This time, a being was born, healthy in body, but without language, without soul fire. Not until Ninhaseg, in the most sacred act of divine rebellion, placed the fertilized seed within her own womb, did true life arrive. And so it was that Adamu was born. This wasn't a myth. This was the moment when genetic manipulation met divine motherhood. And Ti-Amat, the counterpart, was soon created, not simply as a partner, but as a mirror of awakening. She was sculpted from the same essence, perfected not only to balance Adamu, but to carry within her the seed of future civilizations. And then, something happened that the gods feared most. Adamu and Ti-Amat began to show signs of awareness. They looked at each other with new eyes. They made coverings of leaves. They began to question. They began to feel shame, not taught, but born, evidence of a soul waking within clay. What happened in Eden was not a fall. It was a rise. And perhaps that is why this story has been twisted, rewritten, reframed, because to awaken is to become dangerous. So now ask yourself, What if your blood remembers this moment? What if your soul was once stirred by the same spark? Adamu and Ti-Amat were not failures. They were the beginning of something divine. Something too powerful to be left untamed. Drop a comment if this resonates with you, if somewhere inside you feel you were made for more than obedience. Let us move now to the deeper conflict. The great divide, not between humans and gods, but between gods themselves. Enki versus Enlil. The divine civil war over free will. They were brothers not by temperament, but by blood. Enki, the whisperer of wisdom, the bringer of waters, the one who saw potential in the chaos of man. And Enlil, the commander, the keeper of order, the fierce guardian of divine law. Where Enki saw light, Enlil saw fire. Where Enki gave, Enlil guarded. The war was not of weapons, but of vision. To Enki, mankind was not a mistake, but a message. He saw in Adamu a spark that even the gods could not replicate. Imagination, will, the ache for meaning. But Enlil saw danger. He saw the worker who spoke back, the being who questioned the gods, the creature who, if left unchecked, might one day challenge the throne itself. And so the conflict erupted, not in thunder, but in decree. Enlil declared humanity must remain ignorant. Tools, not thinkers, hands to dig, not hearts to dream. He forbade access to sacred knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, the essence of life, the code to self-awareness. But Enki quietly refused. He gave Ti-Amat the knowledge anyway. He whispered to her beneath the trees. He told her of their origin, of their power, of the divinity hidden in their very blood, that they were not mere creatures, but reflections of something higher. When Ti-Amat ate from the tree of knowing, she was not defiant. She was brave, and when Adamu followed, he was not disobedient. He was faithful to her, to love, to the truth. What followed was exile, but in that exile, freedom. What Enlil feared was not sin. It was sovereignty. Real-world parallels abound. We see it today in how truth is hidden behind systems, in how power fears education, how hierarchies resist questioning. The Eden story is not ancient, it's eternal. And so a lesson emerges. Knowledge is not forbidden because it is harmful, but because it liberates. Comment your thoughts. Was Enki right to break the divine order? Or was Enlil protecting a sacred balance? And as we journey further, we must confront an even more mysterious truth, one hidden not in action but in biology itself. The worship gene. Did the gods program our beliefs? There is a moment in the tablets where Enlil, seeing the wild and willful nature of early humans, commands Enki to instill obedience. But Enki, ever the trickster, did something far more profound. Instead of forcing loyalty, he encoded choice. Within the human genome, twisted like serpents along the tree of life, he placed a switch, the ability to turn on or turn off the impulse to worship. Think of it. Perhaps faith is not merely culture. Perhaps it's chemistry. Some people crave devotion. Others resist authority with every cell of their being. Could this be genetic memory? Could the ancient architects of our species have hardwired reverence into our DNA? Scientists today speak of the VMAT2 gene, the so-called God gene. It influences spirituality, moral cognition, and mystical experience. Could this be a modern echo of what Enki whispered into our code? But Enki did not make worship mandatory. He made it optional. That's why some bow and others rebel. That's why humanity is torn between religion and reason, submission and sovereignty. This truth challenges both science and scripture. It tells us that belief is not always a choice. It is often inheritance. But in that inheritance lies power. If we can choose to awaken the gene, we can also choose to transcend it. This is the battle humanity continues to fight, not against gods but within ourselves. The lesson? True devotion is not blind, it is chosen. And so we return to the sacred question, what does it mean to be created in the image of gods, yet endowed with the power to walk away? If you've ever felt torn between faith and freedom, you're not alone. Comment below. Do you feel your belief is a calling or a code? Now, let us turn to the moment everything changed, the awakening of Eve and the shattering of illusion in the garden. For what came next was not a punishment, but a promise. That once you taste truth, you can never return to ignorance. The forbidden truth. What Eve discovered and why it shattered. Eden. When Eve opened her eyes not just to the world, but to the truth behind it, the garden was no longer a paradise. It became a prison. In the annals of the Lost Book of Enki, this moment was not an accident. It was the climax of divine intervention, carefully seeded by Enki himself. He did not just grant Eve life. He offered her the one thing that separates the divine from the designed: knowledge. This was no mere apple, no idle curiosity. This was an awakening of the soul. Eve was not the sinner. She was the seeker. Through Enki's whisper, she learned that she and Adamu were not born of dust alone. They were the product of divine engineering, crafted with Anunnaki DNA, designed initially as obedient laborers, primitive workers, and nothing more. She learned they were not unique creations, but iterations, refined through trial, error, and divine experimentation. But what startled her heart more than anything was the realization that they carried something the gods could not program: a soul. The fire within, the capacity to question, to feel deeply, to dream beyond function. She tasted truth, and it changed her. When Adam returned, she passed the spark to him. And in that sacred transfer, mankind was reborn, not into sin, but into self-awareness. They covered their bodies not because they were ashamed of skin, but because they finally understood that they were not mere beasts. They were conscious. And consciousness is the first step toward sovereignty. What followed was not divine punishment, but systemic reaction. Enlil, the enforcer of order, saw this awakening as rebellion. In his eyes, Adamu and Ti-Amat had defied their creators, dared to become more. But Enki saw the opposite. He saw the beauty of emergence, the miracle of choice, blooming in the soil of servitude. This truth mirrors our modern world. The moment we learn who controls our narratives, religious, political, or technological, we are faced with a choice: obedience or awakening. And like Eve, many of us stand before the tree of knowledge daily. In the algorithms we follow, in the education we receive, in the beliefs passed down unquestioned. The fruit is still there, waiting to be taken, not for rebellion, but for remembrance. So ask yourself, was Eve punished or promoted? Was Eden ever a gift or just a gilded cage? If you have ever felt that the world around you is a veil, a carefully constructed illusion meant to keep you small, you are not alone. Like Eve, you carry the seed of truth. All it needs is courage to bloom. And as her eyes opened, the gods grew afraid. Because now, the creation was beginning to understand its creators. And with understanding comes the potential to surpass. Let us now walk forward into the storm that followed, one not of metaphor, but of water and death. A flood not only of the earth, but of fear, silence, and cosmic cleansing. The Great Flood, natural disaster, or engineered reset. In the annals of every ancient civilization, From Mesopotamia to the Mayans, from the Hopi to the Hebrews, there is a flood, a cleansing, a reset, a divine wrath that drowns the world and leaves only a remnant behind. But the question that echoes louder than thunder is, was it truly nature, or was it design? According to the Anunnaki flood myth, the answer is chilling. It was both. When the Anunnaki leaders saw that humanity was multiplying, growing in knowledge, expressing emotion, art, worship, and rebellion, they grew divided. Enlil saw danger. To him, mankind had become loud, disruptive, an echo of the Igigi rebellion that had once shaken the stars. He decreed the earth would be purged. The flood, he decided, would be allowed to come, not caused but not prevented. He silenced the watchers. He forbade the transmission of warnings. He vowed no ark, no rescue, no divine grace. But Enki could not agree. In secret he whispered to Ziusudra, Noah, not in dreams, but in genetic wisdom, in building instructions encoded with celestial precision. He taught him how to survive not only water, but erasure. And so the Ark was not just a boat, it was a seed vault, a DNA repository, a biosphere disguised as a myth. The story of Noah is not fiction. It is the memory of a rescue mission, led by the same God who once planted truth in the garden. The flood came. Earth tilted, groaned, cracked. The waters surged from below and fell from above. Mountains were swallowed. Cities disappeared beneath the sea. What survived was not just a man and his family, but a lineage encoded with memory. Today, we find ancient ruins underwater, cities like Dwarka, Yonaguni, the Bimini Road. We dismiss them or date them incorrectly because we are not ready to admit that history is deeper than we're told. What was wiped out was not sin, but sovereignty. And so a lesson remains. When knowledge spreads beyond control, systems will reset, not to protect the people, but to protect the powerful. Drop a comment if you've ever felt the flood is still coming, only this time it's not made of water, but of data, distraction, and digital dependence. The ark we need now may not be wood, but wisdom. A preservation not of bodies, but of memory. From the waters, new roots would grow, and from those roots came something unexpected. Not a return to savagery, but the birth of something sacred. Civilized man, from slave to seed of divine potential. Out of the mud and trauma of the flood, something began to stir, not just survival, but structure. Ziusudra's children did not rebuild tents. They built temples. They did not hunt beasts. They domesticated them. They mapped the stars, tracked the seasons, crafted language and law. It was not evolution. It was ignition. Adamu, the son of Enki and an earthling woman, was the first to receive this transmission of knowledge. He was not just taught agriculture. He was taught writing, mathematics, astronomy. He was the first priest, the first scientist, the first whisperer of order into chaos. His descendants, Cain and Abel, would mark the beginning of roles, the farmer and the shepherd, the cultivator of land and the caretaker of life. They brought offerings not because they were commanded, but because they remembered. They laid gifts at the feet of gods who once nearly drowned them. But man was no longer silent. Civilized man asked questions. Why are we here? What is the sun doing? Why does the moon follow this pattern? Who writes the laws of heaven? This questioning gave birth to civilization. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Egyptians, they did not rise from chaos. They were inheritors of a lineage too advanced for primitive beginnings. They spoke of gods in skyships, of knowledge passed by beings who walked among them. And in every language, every glyph, every ziggurat, There echoed the name of Enki, not as a tyrant, but as a teacher. This transformation, from the clay to the code, is the greatest miracle of our species. But it was not perfect. Civilized man forgot who lit the fire. They began to worship the gods blindly, not remembering that the divine lived within them. Temples became prisons, kings became demigods. And slowly, the memory of our origin was twisted, not to inspire, but to control. This is our inheritance, a mixture of sacred design and sacred forgetting. But the fire is still in us. You, listening now, you are not just part of a species. You are part of a story, a long and holy tale of becoming, of remembering, of reawakening. So comment if you feel it too, that spark, that strange longing to know more, to rise, to remember. This is not coincidence. This is ancestry. And as we look to what comes next, we do not need new gods. We need new memory, for the truth is not gone. It is simply waiting, waiting in your blood, your breath, your boldness, to be remembered again. Marduk's rebellion, when the sun chose Earth over the throne of Nibiru. In the celestial lineage of the Anunnaki, where blood determined power and inheritance shaped the stars, Marduk was the firstborn of Enki, a prince by divine right. Born not of concubine, but of Enki's legitimate spouse Ninki, he was destined to rule, destined to soar. And yet Marduk, like his father before him, made a choice that shook the heavens. He turned his back on the throne of Nibiru and gave his heart to Earth. This was no ordinary rebellion. It was not waged with weapons, but with love. Marduk fell not for power, but for a woman, Sapanit, a daughter of Earth. Not of royal blood, not of celestial design, but of clay and courage and wild, beautiful soul. Their union defied every law of the gods. Interbreeding between Anunnaki and Earthling was taboo. It blurred the lines. It weakened the bloodline, they said. But Marduk saw something higher. He saw union not as dilution, but as destiny. He chose Earth, and in doing so, he gave up everything. His claim to Nibiru, his place in the heavens, his birthright as heir. But what he gained was sovereignty on Earth. Marduk's rebellion was not selfish, it was prophetic. He believed Earth was not just a colony, it was a crucible. A place where something new could be born. Something that combined the discipline of the gods and the passion of humanity. And so he began to build. He established domains in the land of the dark-hued people, what we may now know as ancient Egypt. There he laid foundations for temples, cities, and systems. He named himself Ras. He taught language, astronomy, law, agriculture. The people worshipped him not because they were forced, but because they saw a god who walked among them, who loved them, who chose them. But with power came fear. Enlil and his bloodline saw Marduk's growing influence as a threat. For if he could unite Earthlings and Igigi under one banner, could he not also reclaim the stars? And so began the silent war, not in battlefields, but in bloodlines, alliances, temples, and calendars. This echoes a truth that still resounds today. Those who build bridges across race, class, belief, and biology are often labeled rebels. But maybe rebellion is what births evolution. Was Marduk reckless, or was he the first true leader of humanity? If you've ever chosen love over legacy, purpose over protocol, drop your thoughts below. You may carry the same fire that moved Marduk to change history. And yet his rebellion gave rise to another, a darker echo, not born of love, but of lust and desperation. The Igigi Mutiny, the fall of the Watchers and the birth of giants. They came down in silence, 200 strong, The Igigi, celestial watchers once stationed on Mars, weary from isolation, from watching life bloom on Earth while they drifted in cold skies. They envied the joy of mankind, the beauty of Earth's daughters, the warmth of home. So they made a pact. If Marduk could wed a daughter of Earth, why not them? They descended in secret during Marduk's wedding, seizing women, claiming them as brides. These unions, unlike Marduk's, were not of devotion, but domination. They broke every law, every vow. And from these unions came the Nephilim, giants of strength and sorrow, children born not from love, but imbalance. Their blood was thick with power, but thin in harmony. They were heroes and monsters, architects and destroyers. The earth began to quake, not from their footsteps, but from their presence. The natural order was disturbed. These giants, part god, part man, did not belong fully to either world. They towered in flesh, but crumbled in spirit. Many of the ancient ruins, massive stones weighing hundreds of tons, could be their legacy, or their warning. Enlil saw this and raged. He declared the earth corrupted. He blamed Enki, blamed Marduk, blamed the Igigi. But perhaps it was not the unions that brought chaos, but the secrecy, the shame, the theft of balance. Real-world myths mirror this. The titans of Greece, the demigods of Gilgamesh, the giants of Genesis, all speak of hybrid beings, magnificent yet tragic. And so the lesson whispers through stone and story. Power without purpose becomes peril. Heritage without humility breeds havoc. Comment if you believe giants once walked this earth, not just in size, but in ambition. And if you feel the blood of giants stirs in you, then walk wisely. Because when the gods saw what had become of earth, they did not argue. They prepared judgment. The final oath. Why the gods let humanity drown, and one man survive. In the halls of Nibruki, Enlil summoned the leaders. The decision was final. Humanity would be left to perish in the coming flood. It would not be a weapon. It would be silence. They would not warn. They would not save. No prophecy. No ark. No intervention. Let the deluge come, Enlil said. Let the earth be cleansed. It was not wrath. It was fear. The gods feared what man might become. They feared their own loss of control. And so, in a sacred assembly, they took an oath, a vow of silence. None would speak to the humans of the approaching cataclysm. None would interfere. But Enki wept. He too took the oath, but the burden was unbearable, so he found a loophole. He spoke, not to Ziusudra, but to the walls of his reed hut, where Ziusudra was sleeping. He did not break the oath, but he broke the silence, and the seed of salvation was planted. Ziusudra was instructed to build a vessel, not of wood alone, but of design, protection, and destiny. He was told what was coming. He was told how to preserve not only his family, but the animals, the seeds, the memory of mankind. The flood came, the oath was honored, but so was hope. This is the paradox of gods. Even in their silence, some choose compassion. And perhaps the lesson for us is this: even when the system turns its back, someone will whisper. Even when the world drowns in ignorance, someone builds an ark of truth. Have you heard whispers in your life? Truths others tried to silence? Drop a comment if you have. Perhaps you are a Ziusudra in your time. And from the flood emerged not just life, but legacy. Legacy and regret, what the gods could not foresee. The gods expected a blank slate, but what emerged was something else. Humanity remembered. They did not rebuild with fear. They rebuilt with fire. They forged tools, rewrote language, crafted rituals, traced stars. The children of Ziusudra multiplied not just in number, but in thought. They remembered the flood. They remembered the gods. And they remembered that once they had been abandoned. The Anunnaki watched in awe. They saw temples rise. They saw offerings laid, but they also saw eyes, human eyes, look back at them not with reverence, but recognition. Enlil felt regret, not for the flood, but for underestimating the human heart. Enki felt sorrow, not because his plan failed, but because it worked. The children of Adapa began to build their own ways. Civilized man no longer needed gods to tell them what stars to follow. They began to read the sky themselves. They began to question. They began to lead. It was not rebellion. It was maturity. A toddler clings. A child asks. An adult chooses. The Anunnaki became not gods, but memories. And in time, myths. And in time, whispers. And here is where you enter. You, who are the legacy of legacy. You are not the creation of gods. You are the continuation of something higher. If you've ever looked up and felt that someone once stood in the sky for you, comment below. If you've ever felt a sadness you couldn't explain, perhaps it's the ache of remembrance, because the past does not die. It waits. And so we ask, what if your blood still carries the essence of the stars? The hidden bloodline, are you a descendant of the gods? In every culture, there are stories of the chosen, the divine child, the bloodline of kings, the red thread of destiny. But what if these weren't metaphors? What if they were memories? The Anunnaki did not just create a worker, they seeded a lineage. They infused their DNA into the clay of earth, into Adapa, into the children of Sarpanit and Marduk, into the wombs of mortal women. The result was not just survival, it was sovereignty. Negative blood types, unusual sensitivity, deep empathy. Mysterious dreams, a pull toward the stars. These are not random. These are relics. Maybe you've always felt different. Maybe you've been called too sensitive, too intense, too questioning. Maybe it's not dysfunction. Maybe it's design. The hidden bloodline is not about superiority. It's about stewardship. It's about remembering what the gods forgot, that the greatest divinity is not domination, but devotion. The question is not whether you are descended from the gods. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you live small, or will you awaken the greatness waiting in your very marrow? Will you obey the story, or write a new one? If your heart is beating faster now, that's not coincidence. That's recognition. Drop a comment if you feel it. If something ancient inside you just said, yes, because in the next breath, we will return to the beginning, not to repeat, but to rise. They tried to bury the truth beneath tablets, under oceans, behind veils of myth and misdirection. But truth, like seed in dark soil, always finds a way to grow toward the light. The story of the Anunnaki, the creation of mankind, the sacred defiance of Enki, the awakening of Adamu and Ti-Amat, the heartbreak of the flood, the birth of civilized man, the rebellion of Marduk, the fall of the Igigi, and the whisper of bloodlines that may still flow in our veins. These are not just ancient echoes. They are pages still being written in the marrow of our own becoming. Perhaps the greatest deception was never that gods created us, but that we were made to believe we could not become more. And yet, from the moment Eve touched the fruit, from the moment Ziusudra stepped off the ark, from the day Adapa taught his children how to write their names under stars, The old lies began to unravel. The way we walk, the way we love, the way we look up at the night sky and feel a longing we cannot name, it all speaks of a truth too radiant to suppress. We are not broken. We are not beasts. We are bridges between worlds, children of clay and cosmos, of breath and brilliance. Born with the divine spark, not to bow but to build, not to serve blindly, but to remember boldly. The gods walked among us not just to rule, but to reflect. They too were flawed. They too made choices in love and in pride, and in those choices they planted seeds, some of destruction, yes, but also of wisdom, of courage, of compassion. Enki's defiance was not rebellion, it was redemption. A quiet vow that mankind would not be left in darkness forever. You, listening now, you are not late to the story. You are the continuation of it. If something inside you stirred while hearing these words, if a memory too deep for language rose within you, then you already know. Your soul has heard this before. This is your inheritance, not gold, not thrones, but remembrance. The remembrance that you are not powerless. That within your breath is the breath of stars, that you are part of a sacred bloodline of awakening, seeded by the ancients, watered by time, and ready now to bloom. So let this not just be a video you watch. Let it be a mirror. Let it be the moment something ignites again in you. The ancient knowing that you are here for more than survival. You are here for purpose. You are here to rise. You are here to remember. And if this message touched something holy in you, if even one sentence lit a lamp in the darker corners of your day, I want to thank you. Truly, from the depths of my heart. If you feel that this video brought value to your soul or helped you find light during shadowed times, I invite you, with gentleness and grace, to send back a little energy, just enough to keep the flame alive. Every small act of support, every share, every like, every ripple of kindness is immeasurably precious. It is not about donation. It is about devotion. To the light we are trying to keep burning together. Your support, in whatever form it takes, helps me continue to create these offerings, videos that aim to heal, to inspire, to guide, and to uncover what was lost. So, if your heart feels called, leave a comment below. What do you believe about our origins? Are we descendants of the gods? Or were the gods too just a reflection of us trying to remember who we truly are? Which part of this journey spoke to you the most? Which ancient truth do you carry within you still? Your words matter. Your voice matters. In this community of seekers, it is the connection between us that turns knowledge into wisdom and story into soul work. And if you would like to stay on this path with me, this path of rediscovering sacred histories, decoding the Lost Book of Enki, exploring the truth behind the Anunnaki, Nibiru, the creation story, the Watchers and the Nephilim, and the healing power of remembering who we are, I invite you to like this video and subscribe. Not just to follow, but to walk together, step by step, star by star, breath by breath. We are not done. The story continues. And though the gods have gone quiet, though the temples have crumbled, and the myths have been rewritten, the truth is still alive, in us, in you. You are not lost. You were never lost. You are the awakening the ancients dreamed of. Thank you. Thank you with all my heart.